saying tomorrow morning I'll wake up with 5 years sober, and that is like not that was not my intention when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, I was 12 stepped by someone at my work, and she told me, I think you should go to AA. And I like to jokingly say I was dumb enough to do it. Yeah, Casey, I see that flyer. Um, so, but yeah, what it was like. I grew up pretty normally. I grew up in a small town in New Hampshire. Um, Pretty great family, nothing really to like report in terms of my alcoholism. I didn't really drink or do drugs in high school, like maybe like two or three times. I don't remember the first time I put alcohol into my body, but I do remember the first time I put a mind-altering substance into my body. And I didn't have like these words back then, but I have them now. Like finally all my self-centered fear stopped. Um, and it was like my brain could finally shut off and I could just like exhale. And I really liked that feeling. And I didn't really get too into chasing that feeling until I got to college. I went from a small town in New Hampshire to going to college in Tampa, Florida. And as a budding alcoholic, that went about as well as you could have expected it to. I remember one of the first nights I was there. Um, I went out drinking with my suite mates and I drank an entire blue Four Loko. And I remember it was blue because I was just like throwing up blue for hours. And I was so hungover the next morning. I felt like shit. And um, yeah, still couldn't stop throwing up. And I was just like, that was awesome because it got me out of me. And like when I'm not treating my disease, like I just don't want to be me. I don't want to be in myself. Um, and so yeah, kind of kept carrying on through not high school, sorry, college. Um, and the space in between blackouts gradually got smaller and smaller. Um, and it would go from like one in every 5 times to one in every 3 times, every other time. And then every single time I was drinking, I would black out and I wasn't looking to black out. That wasn't my goal. My goal was to reach that point, like right up at the edge of oblivion, where I could still control my body and kind of control what I was saying, but I couldn't feel anything and I couldn't feel that I was in my own skin. Um, that like just often is not a point I ever could reach, and I'd black out and I'd do things without my own consent. I was a big puker, honestly. I fell asleep in full bathtubs. Like I don't know if there's any real explanation for me surviving that other than like my higher power. Um, and yeah, it just kept getting worse. And I had friends pull me aside, like, I think you have a problem. I remember one time on Halloween, I was so drunk that I locked myself out of my apartment and I like put the keys like on my bra strap. And so like I had my keys and I was locked out with basically my keys in my hand. And I'm just banging on the door, waking up my roommate. And like, I don't know, that was like a pretty good metaphor for powerlessness. I have the keys, but I can't open the door. Um, yeah. And so, yeah, I think I had three different friends pull me aside. I would threaten to kill myself. I would do all sorts of stuff when I was blacked out. Um, but I was so desperate for something that got me out of me, and that's what alcohol did. And there are other things I did. Um, Mostly because I'm like, well, it's more socially acceptable to use this substance while I drive, and really not socially acceptable or okay to use any substance when you drive, crazily enough. And yeah, that's what it's like. I don't really know how or what it was like. I don't really know how I graduated college, but I did. I remember I went out drinking like the night before graduation with my parents, and they said this to my brother, but they didn't say it to me. They said, "Does she know she like doesn't have to drink that much?" And it's like, no, I don't know. I don't have to drink that much because like I have to drink that much if I'm gonna feel okay. Um, so yeah, I moved back to New Hampshire. I got a really cool job. My degree was in psychology, and I got to work in counseling, which is like really unheard of just a bachelor's degree. especially the setting it was in. So I felt like I was like, oh, I got out of school, I'm out of Tampa, like Tampa was the problem. And then I like had a graduation party, and it's like the ideal situation for an alcoholic like me, where like everyone's like praising me and giving me attention and giving me gifts and money and saying I did such a good job. And even then I still have to drink to the point of like almost blacking out. And at that point I stopped drinking, but I didn't put like the other stuff down. And then I was like, okay, I'll take a tolerance break. And then my friend was like, oh, do you want some of like whatever? And I'm like, well, yeah, of course. Because like every time I draw a line in the sand, I run right across it. Like that's not in active alcoholism, that's not something I can hold myself to, because it's not within my power. Um, so yeah, I was working at that counseling job. Like the majority of the staff there were sober. And there was this woman after a little while, like she was like, I think you're an alcoholic. And this woman, she had never seen me drink. She had never seen me use drugs. I obviously wasn't like talking about how much I blacked out at work. Like occasionally I'd be like, oh, I partied really hard in college. Um, and she said, I think you're acting like a dry drunk, and I think you like need to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And she had been sober for 10 years at that point, and she was an LADAC and like worked in all sorts of treatment centers and stuff. And I'm like, I felt like, okay, the jig's up. Like, you got me. I'll go. Like, clearly this has become an issue over and over and over again. And if this person who's never seen me drink or use drugs is like, I think you're an alcoholic, like just on my behavior, I was like, oh, I'm fucked. So I was like, all right, I'll just never have friends again. I won't have fun. I won't do anything cool. I'll just be sober, I guess. And just like cried and cried and cried. Went to my first meeting. It was in New Hampshire. It was called Women Embracing the Basics. It was on Monday nights. I don't know if it's still active. That's why I'm saying was. And I got there and I just sat and I cried and I like barely choked out saying I was an alcoholic. Um, and like I didn't get sober right at that moment. I went on a trip to Tampa, honestly, a few days after that. And like I tried using substances the way I used to use substances, and it like didn't work. And like AA ruined my drinking in the span of one meeting. Because I wasn't getting there. I wasn't getting out of me. And I was like, well, what's the point of doing this if it's not working? So yeah, went on that trip to Tampa, left all my stuff with my friends there. I was like, just keep it. I don't want it. And I flew back home to New Hampshire. And it's funny, I was on the phone with my sponsor before this, and she was like, your date's the 11th, right? And I'm like, I quite literally have a plane ticket from the day I got sober. I know it's the 7th. Um, so yeah, I started going to AA more and more. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I just wanted to stop feeling the way I was feeling, and like substances weren't stopping that anymore. Um, so yeah, I was in a small town. So it was a lot of old timers and they really loved the crap out of me, even though it's really crazy. Um, and then I got into young people's meetings and I just like loved it because I thought I would never do anything fun. I thought I wouldn't have friends my age anymore. And I went into these meetings, and at first I was like, I hate all these people smiling and laughing. And then I got to become one of those people that were smiling and laughing, which is such a privilege and something that I hope everyone here gets to stick around and be. Um, yeah, I started my step work. I was like, yeah, of course I'm powerless over alcohol. Like my life's unmanageable. Yeah, in active alcoholism, it would take me like 3 days to do one load of laundry, and like throughout sobriety, like my life is still unmanageable in sobriety if I'm not working this program, and relying on a power greater than myself. And then step 2 and 3, I was like, sure, whatever. Like, never really had beef with like God or anything. Like, thankfully, like we went to church when I was a kid, and like the higher power I pray to now is not a Christian God or capital God. I just borrow the Christian prayers because I'm lazy and I don't feel like making up something new. Um, and Yeah, I was like, sure, whatever, that's fine. I worked at Jesus camp. It's chill. Yeah, sure. God can do my life better than I can, whatever. And then I just totally stalled out on my on getting into the fourth step. And so, yeah, I got sober November 2019, and like 4 months into that, COVID hit. And I was like, awesome. I just had my whole life turned upside down getting sober. And now the world isn't normal. Like I don't know what's going on. Like everything's on Zoom. I went from going into work to doing like group therapy with teenagers via Zoom, which was always interesting. Um, but I kept going to meetings and I stayed in the middle, and begrudgingly I picked up a chair position for a year long. And I chaired that Zoom meeting for a year. And it wasn't always my favorite thing to do on a Saturday night. But I was there every Saturday and it kept me sober and it kept me in the middle during a time that like took a lot of people back out. And like I don't know why I got to stay and other people went back out, but I'm grateful that I got to. In April 2020, my grandfather passed away, and that was like my first really big loss in sobriety. Um, yeah, him and my grandmother would come up every single weekend and help my dad with projects and just hang out with us. And like they saw like my first steps when I was a kid. Like they'd watch me when my parents would go to work. So it was pretty brutal, and it was during COVID, and like I still showed up to meetings and I remember just like sobbing. And I really like this quote. I think it's from like one of the four words. It's like face to face or modem to modem or face to face alcoholics speak the language of the heart. And the program still worked even when it was over Zoom. Even when I couldn't be in the same room as these people and feel them hug me or like drink coffee with them, I still felt their love. And yeah, I stalled out on the steps for a little bit longer so it could get really painful. And I got another job, so I had two jobs so I could make a mess at both of them. Um, and then I like called my sponsor and I was like, I'm in so much pain. Like, my life sucks. What am I doing? And she was kind of like, do it or don't. Like, do you want to be in this program? Do you want to do this program or not? And so I was like, all right, fine, I'll do it because I don't know what else I'm gonna do. I went through my fourth step in probably like a week or two. And that's not being like, oh, look at me. Like, I just like, it had already happened. Like, how is it going to hurt me by writing it down and telling it to this like nice older woman who makes me tea? And like, so, and same with my fifth step, it already happened. Like, the worst part is over. I told it to her and I got my fourth and fifth step done before I had a year sober. And six and seven, I spent a long time in six and seven. I used Drop the Rock. If you use Drop the Rock, great. If you don't use Drop the Rock, great. It's your program. That's just what I did. And I spent like 2 months in six and seven, and that was really painful because for the first time I had like taken a really hard look at myself for like what my behaviors really were and like the type of person I was. Um, and that was tough, but I think it really transformed my sobriety and I love taking sponsees through it. Eight and nine, like making the list again, it already happened. I already harmed those people. Um, for step nine, I remember telling my sponsor, I was like, I don't have to make amends to my college roommate. She doesn't want to hear from me. Like I lied to this girl's face and betrayed her trust. So like I knew I had harmed her, but I was like, yeah, she probably doesn't even remember. And my sponsor's like, that's great. You can make amends to her first. And I did. And it was still like during COVID times, and I had to do it through like a Google Meet. And she said, I think this is the first time I've heard you take accountability for something you've done. And that really stood out to me. And I like, I don't know, that's what AA has shaped me into today, someone that can take accountability for their actions. Um, yeah, I made amends to my brother and he made amends right back to me. And he's not in this program. He's just like the coolest kid and I love him so much. Um, yeah, I made amends to friends and family. I don't really know why I got to keep so many friends from when I was drinking. And I just had a conversation with my sponsor where I'm like, why isn't my friend trusting my judgment on this? And she's like, didn't your friend have like a front seat to your drinking? Like, can you blame her? So Yeah. And like making amends is still a process I do today. Like I still harm people in sobriety, and it's not like I'm doing it purposefully, but like I step on the toes of my fellows and they retaliate. Um, Step 10, I that is sort of like a day by day thing where if something, it's kind of like a gut check for me almost. Like if something feels off and I like need to make it right, I try to talk to another alcoholic. Um, because my judgment doesn't always isn't always great, even into sobriety, and that's okay. Progress not perfection. For step 11, really good at prayer now. Used to be really bad at prayer, still pretty bad at meditation, but like when stuff hits the fan, like I do find myself relying on a higher power. And I don't always know what that higher power is. I just know it's not me and I know it's not another person. And that's like the extent I need to worry about it for my sobriety. Because it's like when I'm driving the car, we're like careening off the freeway, going through like safety barriers. And when God or my higher power or whatever you want to call it is driving the car, it's like I'm staying nicely in this lane and life goes pretty well. In step 12, I sponsor other women. I do commitments like this. I picked up a service commitment at a home group in Salt Lake. I'm on UCPAA and SNOWYPAA West, and that's not to be like, look at all this cool stuff I do, or look at all these service commitments, or I'm so great. Like, I have to do that to stay sober. And if I want to keep this, I need to give it away. And like my program and the reason I'm here is like, yeah, it's cool that I get to stay sober, but it's a lot cooler and a lot more important that I get to stick around and help the newcomer because they're the most important in the person in the room. Um, and yeah, what life is like now, I moved across the country like 2 months ago, because I wanted to, and it was a cool opportunity that I had. Um, and the only reason I think I was so confident in doing that is because I knew Alcoholics Anonymous is everywhere. I wouldn't say it was easy. It's still hard to adjust, but like the fellowship and the love I've felt from the people here in Salt Lake has been really heartwarming. Obviously, I still miss my friends in New Hampshire. Like they saw me get sober, but like AA has really given me a life that's second to none and like emboldened me in good ways to make good changes in my life. I have a healthy relationship with all my family members. Bad stuff can happen in the world and in my life, and I don't have to drink over it. I can pay my own bills on time. It doesn't take me 3 days to do laundry anymore. I care for my dog. Um, just so many things like that just would not be possible if I was drinking or drugging. And like, it's nice to have the outside stuff. It's nice to have my own apartment and a car and a dog and whatever, because I didn't have like really any of that when I first got sober. But I don't wake up each morning wanting to die. I wake up and I'm like, maybe I'm tired or like I don't feel too great, but I'm not like, oh, I'm really mad I woke up this morning. It's just like, all right, like let's go about my day and see what my higher power has in store for me. And like a lot of the times I just like really almost beg my higher power, like, get me out of self and help me be useful to someone else. So I hope I was useful to someone else tonight. I see my time is running out, so I'll share the time. Thank you.